Warning: some viewers may find the following content disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised.
So, my brother and I, we kind of grew up on Pokemon. Around here, a lot of kids did. It worked out perfectly for us. Every time a new gen came out, one of us would get one version, one of us would get the other. And since our mum liked to spoil us, we both got the third version. This is going to sound at first like a bittersweet story about two siblings who grew up with a couple of games that eventually take them down two different roads. Well, it's a little more than that. The years rolled by, we kept collecting. Game Boys got old, we replaced them. Cartridges finally gave out, we picked up new replacements. But we started down two completely different paths before Ruby, Sapphire and Emerald came out. See, around then, my brother got a Game Shark. We had heard of all these hacks and cheats you could do with them. Even if we were kind of late to the party, they sounded awfully cool. Our first guinea pig cartridge was my brother's blue version. We just dicked around with it a little bit, nothing major, but whatever we did fucked the cartridge up. After just a couple of code entries, it glitched out completely and became unplayable. Naturally, we were upset at first. My brother mourned the loss of his hours of work, and I was sympathetic. I told him, it's okay, we can just replace it I guess. Stupid shark was a waste of money. But here, our paths finally differed. After seeing the mess it had turned the blue version into, I'd become opposed to the idea of hacking or cheating in any of the games. What can I say? I'm a chick, I feel feelings for little pixel critters, at least with that Game Shark. When my brother had taken his game's destruction as a personal challenge or something. I don't think he ever played a game after that which wasn't hacked somehow. Yeah, we played a shit ton of Pokemon, man. But for us, there really wasn't much else to do. We lived way out in the country without many kids, and the farmers didn't want us on their property. So we played Pokemon out on the lawn just about all day, every day. It was pretty awesome to us at least. We lost the Game Sharks when our rooms got moved around. A new addition was built into our house, and it disappeared in the mess of crap that got stuffed into the new closet. Ruby, Sapphire and Emerald arrived, and after playing through them once, we were both in agreement that they were definitely lacking in comparison to the last gen. We both tried another honest playthrough, and though we managed to finish, it left us both yearning for some good old-fashioned nostalgia. Where were our gold, silver and crystal cartridges though? It took us probably a month to dig through those boxes we'd been too lazy to open up before, but we finally found one full of shitload of our old electronics. My old purple Game Boy Color still worked. His red one could no longer hold batteries in place. Both of our GBAs were fine though, along with our snake lights and link cables. That one with the nifty little connector in the middle that had always wrapped up oh so carefully to avoid fraying the wires and condemning it to the trash like our last cable. We both grabbed up everything we could. It was so nice to have Yellow, which had been my first and most cherished game out of all the series, not just Pokemon, and Red and Gold back. We went through the motions of checking our old files, taking in all the memories, and eventually we figured the Gen 1 stuff was just too nostalgic to get rid of. I restarted Gold, he restarted Silver. Immediately he snatched the Game Shark out of the box and slipped it into the back of his GBA. I just shook my head at him. I remember what I said to him. That thing will kill your game, you know. He never liked me preaching to him about abusing pixels. I just kept my mouth shut after that. But I had put him off from playing with me. I guess it was just one too many times or something. I ought to know just to keep my thoughts to myself, really. It was a couple of days later that it happened. I was out on the porch, Game Boy in hand, just about to go into the Elite Four, when I realised I needed a little help. My team was ill-balanced thanks to me playing through the game for leisure, and at the time, I was no great trainer that could pull off gimmick runs. I knew that my brother had been 2 badges ahead of me when we last checked with one another, so I was hoping maybe he'd let me borrow a Pokemon or two just for this run. Now the thing is that I've spent the last 24 hours at a friend's place. I had literally come home, dumped my bag in my room, and crept out into the sun with my GBA to play. I had no idea what he had been up to. For all I knew, he was done with the game and onto a new one, which I figured was all the better for me, since he wouldn't need those Pokemon, and I'd rather stand a better chance of nicking a few. So I got up and went into the house, and when I was crossing the living room, I noticed all of his Pokemon games lying on the floor. Some of the cartridges had been mangled, like they'd been hacked at with something sharp. Even his old blue version, long ago dead and too sentimental to throw away, was lying with the plastic cut, ragged, split almost halfway up one side, completely unusable anymore, even if it would have worked. I was a little scared. This had to have happened this morning, otherwise our mum would have seen this. They wouldn't be lying on the ground. Tucking my GBA into the pocket, I crept over to his room and found the door unlocked. Somehow, that was even more concerning. I walked in and found my brother sitting at the edge of his bed. His GBA was in pieces on the floor at his feet, smashed to bits. Next to him on the bed were a hammer and our mother's gardening scissors. His face was paler than I had ever seen it, even whiter than the time we'd gone corning and the old guy up the street, legally blind and a raving nutcase, had come and chased us into the trees with his shotgun. It was now I also noticed the Game Shark on the ground, a silver cartridge corner poking from under his bed. Somehow, they'd been spared with the wrath of the hammer. "Are you okay?" I asked. I remember the chills that ran through me. He was my little brother. Seeing him like this was horrifying. It was awful, I remember him rasping, and the way his voice rattled made my knees weak. "Oh God, white, everywhere, and then black." I remember running over and hugging him, and I remember his limp arm fell and brushed the Game Boy in my pocket, and his sudden scream right into my ear, making me jump and bite my tongue by accident. He ripped the handheld from my pocket and hurled it at the far wall. I cried out at the dent the plastic system made there. Running over to collect it, the screen had gone dark. Though I feared the worst when I flicked the switch, it powered up normally. I waited there in the corner, trying to pretend the GBA mattered enough to not go to run for our mum. The volume was on. The Pokemon theme started up, and then he screamed again, picking up the hammer. This time, I screamed too, and ran from the room, my GBA clutched to my chest like a shield. He ended up in the psych ward of that hospital for 2 days. When we went to visit him, I left my GBA at home. No one could figure out what had set off the strange, manic behaviour. There was some talk that I didn't understand at the time, about some kind of disorder he may or may not have had. But even though Mum and I had collected and brought up all the cut cartridges to be looked at, Mum's idea, not mine, no one had even thought to tie it back to the game. Maybe that was all my fault. I hadn't said a word about what happened when he accidentally touched my Game Boy, or the blind, white terror he had been thrown into when the music had started. On my last visit to the hospital, before school on the second day, I was left alone in the room with him, while Mum had some private talk with the doctor about precautions to take should this happen again. I sat in a chair next to the bed where he was staring at the ceiling, but then suddenly, he sat up, making me flinch. "Hey," he told me, "Angie, go in my room when you get home." I didn't understand what he meant, but then I remember the things we hadn't packed up and brought in, the game and the hacking tool under his bed. "Get rid of them. I don't ever want to play with them again." His voice was so weary and desperate. He sounded like an old man on his deathbed. My poor, damaged little brother. How could I refuse? "Promise you'll get rid of them." "Okay, I promise." I was carted off to school late, and through the whole day, I only had made my promise to him in my head. I didn't know it at the time, but this would be the last time that I could ever play the big sister role and help him out. I just had to get home and get rid of that game. But as the day went on, a sick curiosity started to well through my own head. What could have possibly happened to that game to scare him so badly? I was scared myself, but I just had to know. I had to. I had to go home. I went home and went to his room, bending over on overcovering what horror was waiting for me. Mum had since vacuumed the room, and the cartridge and Game Shark were no longer visible. I got down and crawled half under the bed, feeling timid but holding on to the promise I made as my badge of courage. Under the bed, there was enough dust to make me cough, enough old Legos and various other toys that I couldn't set my elbow down without it landing on something. But I finally saw both objects. They had been shoved to a corner on top of the notebook that looked too new to have been down here long. Unthinking, I grabbed the corner of the paper and dragged everything out with me, still wheezing from the dusk, allergies and all. They looked so innocent, simple toys and a simple spiral bound of papers. When I set Silver version and the Game Shark on the floor, I took a closer look at the notebook. On it were scrawled at least 20 different cheat codes, but one had been scratched out with a Sharpie over it where it had initially been drawn in with pen. This was confusing. He had really tried to erase it. The marker had been pressed to the paper so hard that the ink soaked through most of the pages around it, almost 2/3 of the way to the cardstock back cover. But pen has a way of sticking around. I picked up the notebook and tilted it back in the light, and the reflective surface of the Sharpie revealed the indents that had been left where he had written. The code was an unintelligible mess of letters and numbers, but the words next to it confused me. Easter egg, snow on Mount Silver. I remember what I had said to him when I found him. He had been raving about white, and then black. Could he mean snow? Even though it was only August and the temperature was still climbing to 90 degrees every day, a chill ran down my spine. Did I dare? I had to see. I slid gold out of my GBA and stuck silver in its place. It took me almost 15 minutes to compose myself, and I turned it on. It started up normally. I left the sound on low, too afraid of what I might hear to keep it up the full way, and too curious to turn the whole thing off. The title screen was completely normal, Lugia again, but somehow menacing, despite my common sense telling me it was exactly the same picture as every other time I'd started up the game. How bad could this be, I asked myself. His note said Easter egg. Didn't that mean that the coding was already in the game? The menu came up, still absolutely normal. His character was Blake, with a mostly filled Pokédex, but the time was odd. He had max time. I knew he couldn't have been playing that long. I had barely logged 50 hours on my own game, and I was at the Elite Four, and I was playing slowly. Probably the result of his hacking fucking up his file, I thought. Well, whatever then. The game started, and the first thing I noticed was the prolonged black screen. It took almost a minute for anything to change, and there was no sound at all. The hairs on the back of my neck were standing up already, but it was too late to turn back. Finally, a very dim sort of map came onto the screen, but it looked like static. What was going on? I squinted down and realised with a fearsome pang that it was actually the Mount Silver map, but what I thought was static was heavy falling snow, so this is where he had last saved the game. I checked his party, a very normal team for someone who had been using a Game Shark. Typhlosion, Feraligatr, Meganium, Pidgeot, Tyranitar, Lugia, all level 100 with modded moves, typical for him. Something about their sprites was strange. They seemed sullen in a way, the colours seemed washed out, and their expressions lacked the usual vigour they normally had. I chalked this up to missing pixels or something due to the hacking. The map had brightened up just a smidgen when I closed out the start menu. Indeed, somehow the snow was falling very heavily. Pixels danced across the screen so fast it was hard to see the little sprite that was my brother's character. Something was off about him too. When I had checked the information, it was the same as the Pokemon sprites. The colours were dull, in fact, now that I thought about it, he almost looked frostbitten. My stomach tightened, and I turned and tried to move back down the mountain. As I hit the bottom of the screen, words popped up, and there was finally a sound, my sprite hitting an invisible wall. I can't turn back now. That was unsettling. I went into my Pokemon and tried to use Pidgeot's fly ability. I can't fly in this, obviously referring to the snow. Fuck this, I thought, going into his bag. There was an escape rope. I tried using it. I can't go back anymore. What was going on? Once again I tried to walk down the mountain, and to my horror, the words changed with every single attempt. I can't run away. I can't go back. I can never go down. The last one sent a frigid feeling through my heart. There was no way down the mountain. I had to climb. Turning the little sprite around, I moved him forward. No resistance at all through my walking speed, although it was oddly slow. What was truly weird was the lack of grass, of trainers, or anything but the white snow, which still blew across the screen and made it almost impossible to see. As I moved further up the mountain, his walking speed became slower and slower. The static curtain of pixels grew thicker and thicker, so that I could barely make out the features of the map. But it seemed like the only way to move was straight ahead anyway. I reached what looked like a set of stairs at the very top of the screen. I didn't remember this being here before. As I tried to move up, the little sprite paused. I'm cold. But now even I was getting goosebumps. His walking speed had become painfully slow, as if somehow he was being impeded up the little staircase. More text appeared on the screen. Meganium has died. What the fuck? I thought. Pokemon don't die. I checked in my party and was frightened and confused about what I saw. Meganium's sprite had been replaced by a big X. All of my other Pokemon sported varying degrees of damage, though I hadn't battled once. I went into my bag and found a single revive. I attempted to use it. It's too late, it said. What kind of Easter egg was this? There wasn't anything to do. I tried to turn around, yielding the same message as before, so I just kept climbing. Pidgeot has died. I checked again. Surely enough, there was the little red X. This time I selected it and looked at the Pokemon itself, trying to figure out what was wrong. I wish I hadn't. The sprite was mangled. Pieces of it were missing. What was left was splotched with a sickening blue and grey colour, and its eye was a solid black pit. I flipped down to Meganium. The same deal. A leg missing, a chunk of its neck, most of its head save that pitch black dead eye. Morbid curiosity urged me onward, and the path never deviated from the straight upward road I travelled the entire time. Along the way, every now and then, another party Pokemon would die. An examination of its sprite would show it was in the same condition as the others, until all I had left was Typhlosion. One more staircase was up ahead. I climbed it, braced for whatever horror awaited me. I hit the summit. It was deserted. Red was nowhere to be seen. The snow had stopped falling. In the very centre of the map was something sticking out of the snow. It looked like a Pokeball. Okay, maybe all this creepy shit led up to something climactic. Final battle using whatever was in there. If I picked it up, maybe Red would come out of hiding. I walked over and examined it. There was a burst of static noise from my game that made me jump. Whatever appeared on the screen was a battle animation. My trainer sprite appearing, his skin tinged blue, against another mangled Pokemon sprite. It was Celebi. In the centre of that black hole that was its eye, a single red dot burned out like an ember. The thing looked rotted. I didn't even throw out my mostly dead Typhlosion before it had moved. Celebi used Perish Song. A screech came out of my GBA, and I almost dropped it as the screen went to white. Part of me was relieved, thinking that my final Pokemon had been KO'd, and I would be transported to a Pokemon Center. But I was wrong. My sprite reappeared in what looked like a cave. Was I now inside the mountain? I checked my trainer card and felt sick. The sprite was just as mauled as the Pokemon had been. A leg gone, a single eye remaining, pitch black and so, sad looking. Tears welled up at the corner, and every colour on him was replaced by the sick shades of frosty blue and grey. Every stat on card was reduced to 0, except the time, which still read max time. I quickly moved back to the map. His sprite there mimicked the horror it had become on the trainer card. Pieces were missing, everything was discoloured. I started trying to walk, and at first I received the message. It's so cold. There was only one more direction to go. Upward. I moved on every now and then, and would be stopped by a message that made my heart sink even lower. Mother, it feels so cold. I can't go on. The walls, as I walked, became darker and darker until they were pitch black at the end. There was an exit there, marked only by a white outline. I had no choice but to go through it. I opened into the chamber that was also solid white. The only way to distinguish the walls was a thin grey line that marked them as separate from the floor. Against the far wall, there was another sprite, red sprite, intact. I had come this far, I had to finish it. I walked right up to him and hit A. Battle started. Red sprite had none of his deformities that made my own. The colours were the same, blues and greys, but he was intact. He just looked extremely sad. His first Pokemon came out. It was Venusaur. It was just like my own had been, but level 0 with a speck of health. I set out Typhlosion, who had just 6 health left. No Pokemon made a single sound when they were brought into battle. Venusaur used Struggle. There was no animation, just a single point of damage done to Typhlosion, then the opposing sprite dropped dead off the screen. Venusaur has died. There was no text asking me to switch out. Instead there was what just looked like dialogue from Red. ... His next Pokemon was Blastoise, even more mangled than Venusaur had been. It too had struggled and died. Every round there was just the anonymous ... from their trainer. Every sprite was more damaged than the last. His Espeon was barely distinguishable as a Pokemon. I realised something. He was sending them all out of order, which saved one Pokemon for last. Pikachu. Pikachu came out, and it was grotesque too. It was discoloured like it was frostbitten. It was missing half an ear, and half of its body and tail. Its head was mostly intact, but its eyes were much larger than they should have been. It glared at me like pitch black windows into hell. But the thing that got me the most was the giant smile that extended almost all the way to the edge of his head. Its health was somehow at 0, or at least it looked that way. My hands were shaking. I didn't even get a chance to attack. Pikachu used Pain Split. Pikachu has died. Typhlosion has died. It cut back to the image of Red Sprite. Now it looked like mine with the body, so butchered it looked like a carcass stripped of most of its meat, except it had those same soulless, deranged eyes as Pikachu. I finally understood what happened. They were dead. They were dead, and this sub-level of the mountain was the hell they resided in. Red finally spoke. It's over. The screen flashed black and white for a moment. Used Destiny Bond. A horrible, hideous screeching started to issue from my GBA. The screen went white, and it shrieked at me, and I threw it to the floor and pressed my back against the bed. The horrible noise continued for several long moments when the screen stayed white, then went black, and then there was silence. It took me a long few moments, but I eventually stood up, took the game shot, I took the notebook, I took that fucking possessed game, I picked them all up and carried them to the garbage can we'd set out for the morning pickup, and threw them in. When I got back to the house, I didn't know what made me do it, but I picked up the yellow version and inserted it into my Game Boy. I think it was part of me determined to make sure it hadn't somehow been tainted. The music then started up. The game played. I turned to my Pikachu and hit A. Its smiling face greeted me with an ear twitch and a big pixelated smile. A pleasant, normal smile. I turned my game off and spent the next hour crying on the floor. My brother and I never did play a Pokemon game together. He gave up for good. I stuck to replaying my comforting, unhacked games. That winter, the snow fell thick. And that, my dorks, was Easter Egg Snow on Mount Silver, a Pokemon haunted / hacked game creepypasta. My final thoughts on this story? I love this story. It is so good, and I don't know why. It's so unique, and god dang I love the picture associated with it. It's really sad, and it's a good twist on creepy hacked games of Pokemon. Watching as the situation becomes hopeless and hopeless for Gold, and watching as Pokemon slowly deteriorate to the point that they died. That ending, was really good. The Pikachu sprite scares me the most. But overall, this story is great. However, I did notice some flaws with the grammar. It switched between American and British text. No idea why, if that was intentional or not. Anyways, if I was to give a final rating on this story, I'd give it an 8 out of 10. This is a really well-made creepypasta. This is hacked games done right. Definitely. Also, before I go, I'd like to show you guys something. Before this creepypasta ends, I'd like to thank Noodles, Simping, and Broly for making the fan art, 2 fan art over here. This is Simping Noodles, and this one is Broly. I want to thank both of you for drawing these pictures. I really like them. And yeah, thank you. Anyways, this is the end of the review. I will see you guys in the next one. Goodbye, everybody.